Hello everyone. So in this lesson, I'm going to be explaining to you how to solve simple equations with fractions this time. Now, for a lot of students, they struggle with solving simple equations with fractions because, first of all, they don't really like fractions. So here today, I'm going to try and overcome this problem by going through some simple examples and then a worded problem at the very end. So let's get started. So you have this equation here, 4x divided by 3 is equal to 8. So as you can see that 4x on 3, this is a fraction. Alright, and to solve this equation, what we need to do first is try and get rid of the fraction, because we do not like fractions. Fractions are our worst enemies. So how do we get rid of a fraction? Well, one way is to somehow remove this denominator. Okay, so to remove the denominator from the fraction, in other words, what I want to do is go from 4x on 3, turn it into 4x. And this is what I mean by removing the denominator, okay? So what I can do is I can multiply this fraction by 3, okay? Because if I multiply a fraction by the denominator, I get rid of the denominator, okay? So I'm going to multiply the left-hand side by 3. Now, we want to be fair, right? So if we want it to be fair, we have to multiply the left-hand side and the right-hand side by 3. Otherwise, it won't be fair. So then, we multiply the left-hand side by 3, we get 4x. Remember, we multiply by the denominator to get rid of the denominator. So it's not there anymore. Now we just have 4x. And the right-hand side, we also have to multiply by 3. So we get 24. Good. Alright, so now as you can see, this equation has been reduced to a more simple equation, right? This equation has fractions, this equation does not. So we've moved one step ahead. Right, in the next step, what we want to do is we want to make x by itself, right? Because at the end of the day, we want our answer to be x is equal to something. So then what we can do is to turn the 4x into an x, we can divide it by 4, right? Now, if we want to divide the left side by 4, we got to divide the right-hand side by 4 as well, because we want it to be fair. Fair is good. All right, so we divide this by 4, we get x. 4x divided by 4 is x, and 24 divided by 4 is, as you should already know, it's 6. I hope you do not need to use a calculator to do this, because that would be not the best. All right, so that's this equation done. I'll go to the next question. Ooh. Now this one looks slightly more complicated, but don't worry. I'm just going to make it easier for you. Now here you have a number plus a fraction with a pronumeral is equal to a number. So in our previous question, what we did was we had to get rid of the fraction by multiplying by the denominator. But in this question, our first step would not be to do that. What we can do is we can first get rid of the 4, because this 4 is also quite annoying, right? So what we can do is we can take away 4 from both sides to make this equation more simple. Now you should already know, if I have 4 plus 5x on 2 take away 4, the 4's will just cancel out, right? 4 take away 4 gives you 0, 0 plus 5x on 2 gives you 5x on 2. Equals to, now 29 take away 4, that will just give you, as you should know, 25. Now we have an equation that is very similar to the example that we did earlier. So then you should be able to do this by now, after I've explained to you how to do this. We have a fraction, so to get rid of the denominator, we have to multiply by the denominator. And what we do to the left side, we do to the right side as well. So what we should be left with is 5x is equal to 50, right? 25 times 2 is 50. And the final step, to finish it off, we want to make x by itself. So we're going to divide this side by 5 and divide this side by 5, right? Fair is good. All right, we divide 5x by 5, we get x, as you should already know, equals to 50 divided by 5. That's no rocket science, you get 10. Okay, and here we have the answer. So these are the two simple examples that I have gone through. Now I'm going to go through a slightly more the abstract example where your variable is at the bottom. Now, when it comes to doing these questions, there's actually two ways to do it. So I'm going to explain to you the slow way first, because that's the way that teachers will normally teach you. They will not teach you the quick way. So the slow way is to just treat this question the same as this question, okay? So then, to get rid of this fraction, you multiply by the denominator. So the denominator in this case is x. So you don't need to be scared, it's just a variable. Multiply by x. Multiply x to the left hand side, you got to multiply x to the right hand side as well. Right? So 12x times 12 on x times x will just give you 12. Remember, if you multiply by the denominator, it's gone. Okay? So then that's equal to 2 times x, which is 2x. Okay? Once we get to this, we need to get rid of the 2, right? So we divide both sides by 2. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. It's equal to 2x divided by 2. Well, that's just x. And what I will do in my final step is make the x on the left hand side, because it looks much better to have your variable on the left hand side than on the right hand side. Okay. So this is one way that you can do this question. Okay. Now, this is the way that students are taught in school. Now, I'm going to teach you a slightly more magical way, which is, in my opinion, much more effective. Now, if you have, just for example, say you had, I don't know, say 2 is equal to 6 over 3, right? So this is something that we agree. 6 divided by 3 gives you 2. Can we also change this to 3 is equal to 6 on 2? So in other words, we swap the 2 and the 3 around. 3 equals to 6 divided by 2. Now this also makes sense, right? 6 divided by 2 gives you 3. 6 divided by 3 gives you 2. Now using this analogy, we can actually swap the x and the 2 around. Okay. So we can write this as 12 divided by 2 is equal to x. Now that's much easier because we do not actually have to multiply by x to both sides. And we know that 12 divided by 2 is what? 6, right? So 6 equals to x. And then we write the x on the left hand side, x equals to 6. Okay? So this is, in my opinion, a much better way to do this question. And I think that's the way that all students should do this, so that they have lots of time to do other questions in the test. Okay, I'll go through the next example. Now, this is my next example, so slightly more complicated, but I reckon you should be able to do it. Or at least, I hope. Now, with a question like this, like I said, you have a number here and a number there. So we want to put the numbers together. So we want to take away 3 from both sides of the equation, okay? Do not fear what the fraction can do to you. So I'm going to take away 3 from the 5, which is what? 2. Now the right hand side, if you take away 3, the plus 3 and the minus 3 will cancel out to give you 0. So you're left with minus 10 on x. Okay. Hey, now this looks like something that we did earlier. So I'm going to use the special trick and swap the 2 and the x around. Okay. So you get x is equal to minus 10 on 2. And what's minus 10 on 2? As you should know, it should be minus 5, right? Okay, now just be very careful about the trick that I told you. So about swapping the x and the 2 around. Make sure that when you swap it around, your expression looks something like this. So you have a number is equal to a fraction. You cannot swap the 5 and the x around in this equation because you have a plus 3 here. So just be very careful when you swap the 2 numbers around. You can only swap it when you have a number is equal to a fraction. Or you have a fraction is equal to a number. Okay? So just keep that in mind, because I do not want you to lose marks by taking shortcut ways of doing questions. Alright, and now we come to our final example. This is a worded example, and like I said earlier, worded examples are always challenging and students struggle with them. So I'm just going to go through this example and hopefully it will start to make some sense. You have the average of 2 numbers can be found by adding them and dividing the result by 2. So to give an example, say, I don't know, John scored 70% in his first test, and he scored, say, 50% in his second test. Now, to work out the average of the two tests, you have to add them up and divide them by 2, right? So then what should you get? 70% plus 50% should be 120%. Divided by 2 gives you 60%. So John's average was 60% in the two tests. Now, I don't want you to be like John. I want you to do better than this. So you should pay attention to what I'm going to say. The average of a number and double that number is 18. What is the number? Now, when it comes to these kind of questions, I would always introduce a variable. Now, the variable that you introduce is usually, not always, the question that it's asking you. So the question is asking you, what is the number? So what is the number? So they're asking you what the number is. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to let this number be x, okay? And the question says the average of a number. So that's going to be x. And double that number. So double that number is what? If I double x, what should I get? 2x, right? Good. So the average of a number and double that number. So this is the average of a number and double that number. Remember, the average of two numbers can be found by adding them and dividing the result by 2. So this is the average of a number and double the number, okay? Is 18. What is that number? So now we have to solve this equation, okay? So how do you solve it? Well, if you look at the top of the fraction, you have x plus 2x. So we can collect the like terms here. 1 apple plus 2 apples gives you 3 apples. Good. Divided by 2 is equal to 18. Now we just solve. So we have a fraction here. We have 2 at the bottom. We want to get rid of the 2. What do? We multiply it. Multiply and get rid of the 2 forever. So then we get 3x here, right? Multiply by the denominator to get rid of the denominator is equal to 18 times 2. If you don't know it, get a calculator. It's 36. Next step, get rid of the 3. How do you get rid of the 3? Divide by 3. Good. Divide by the number in front of the x. Oops. So then you have x is equal to 36 divided by 3, which is 12. And like with most worded problems, write a concluding statement. Therefore, the number is 12. Okay. Alright, so that concludes today's lesson on solving equations using fractions. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and there's plenty more to come. See you next time.